Child Mind Institute. We're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice and resources, all online and accessible to everyone. During the coronavirus crisis, our telehealth resources include diagnosis and treatment of mental health and learning disorders, 30-minute phone consultations, bereavement and grief support, and remote neuropsychological evaluations. And that's just a sampling. Please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more. Today, I'd like to talk about setting boundaries with teenagers during COVID-19 and answer your questions about that and anything else you're wondering about. Post your questions in the feed. We'll also post some links to helpful resources on childmind.org. Remember, we're here every day and we look through your questions daily. Okay, so I thought it was a good topic to cover as far as, addressing boundaries with teens, because while there's been a lot of talk recently and discussion about addressing, how do we handle younger kids during this period of time? Because oftentimes they require, a lot of behavioral support and academic support. Teens are in a similar but kind of different boat, right? Because they're a lot older. They do have more autonomy compared to younger kids. But even with that, it doesn't mean that, parents aren't still going to run into problems with teens. So when we talk about, just from a developmental perspective, raising teenagers, there are certain things that just kind of come up naturally. One is that teens can feel a sense of invulnerability just developmentally, where they may think that what happens to other people just isn't going to happen to them. And that can't come at a more dangerous time, like, during this crisis, where, what we do know is that, children and teens, they can serve as like vectors carrying this virus and then passing it on to other people. And so if they feel, this sense of, I'm not going to get sick, even if they could be asymptomatic, they can surely pass this on to other people and make other people sick. So that's one reason that setting boundaries is going to be important, because even though, once again, teens have more autonomy, more independence than younger kids, it's still important that, we are mindful of what teens are doing. Second is just this sense of feeling that they are constantly in the spotlight, right? They've got this imaginary audience developmentally where everybody is watching their every move. There is a lot of social and peer pressure. So, wanting to fit in is a really important time for teenagers. And so what their peers are doing is going to be things that they're going to want to do. And I don't know how many parents have often had to say, when teens tell them, so-and-so's mom lets them do X, Y, or Z. And then you say something like, well, if so-and-so's mom, jumps off a bridge, are you going to too? If they let their kids do that. Parents frequently have to mention things like that. So that's another reason to want to just be really mindful of kind of what kids are up to, because if their peers are out and about, in a specific state where social distancing is still in place, staying at home orders are still in place, they are going to be very tempted to want to leave the house as well. And that actually brings us to our first question. This question was posed by Kyra, and she says, I suspect my teenager is sneaking out to see his friends. I tell him how dangerous it is, but he swears he's not doing it and accuses me of thinking the worst of him. What do I do? Well, here's the thing, Kyra. There's a chance that your teen is not doing anything, and you think he's doing it, but he's not. But for the sake of this question, I think let's go with the worst possible case scenario where he might really be sneaking out and you just kind of suspect this. So one of the first things that I would want to know and want you to think about is, what sort of evidence do you have? Right now, you only have enough evidence to suspect him of doing something. I think you're probably going to need more definitive evidence. Now, one thing that I think that you're doing that's really great is just telling him how dangerous this is. It's going to be important for you to just continue to reiterate what those possible consequences can be if he is out spending time with friends, potentially, if he is asymptomatic or others asymptomatic, picking up this virus from others and potentially spreading it. So that's one thing. The second is having some empathy. A teen's social life during this time, just developmentally, is their world. And so by you just, explaining how much you understand that they miss and want to spend time with their friends, I think that can be helpful so that he understands that you get it, and that you're not just putting these restrictions in place just because you want to be mean or you want to keep him from seeing his friends. That couldn't be further from the truth. So just making sure that he understands that you definitely empathize with how he's feeling. Then there's the case of him actually sneaking out. So one, what we've talked about is just kind of needing more evidence. But then also I would be thinking about, is this occurring during the daytime? Is this occurring at nighttime? And I would want to pose the question to you of just kind of how much more supervision can you provide to prevent this from happening? Whether that is, setting alarms on windows or doors, or just making sure that, you're in a close vicinity as he is and not being allowed to, close his bedroom door. I hope it doesn't have to come to that, but those are also additional options just as far as just preventing him from actually sneaking out. Now, if any other families out there are also dealing with this sort of scenario, let us know in the comments kind of how you handled that. I'm sure we could all benefit from just kind of that shared communication. Okay, so our next question comes from Janice. And she says, my daughter is on her phone constantly. I understand she wants to see her friends, but it seems excessive. How do I set limits without causing a fight? All right, Janice. Well, first and foremost, a fight is going to be unavoidable at this point. So we might as well just kind of rip the Band-Aid off of that. As we have already talked about, just a teen's social circle, that's just kind of their world right now. And even more with just the enhancements in technology, a cell phone is now essentially a part of someone's sense of just their self. It's like another arm or something. So any sort of boundaries that you try to set with your teen, she's probably not going to be happy about, because that's just something that teens at this age, they just really, really, really want to be on their phones. But what I think could potentially be helpful is to either set like designated family times within the home where, you take away kind of everyone's cell phone for several hours. And then that way she's off her phone for just kind of designated periods of time in the house. So you're just not limiting necessarily her overall use of being on her phone, but just during specific periods. Another thing that I would think about, and you might have kind of access to this, are modifying the wireless kind of settings within the home. So there are certain like wireless carriers that allow you to like make changes. Like for instance, on a kid's tablet, you can set specific like screen time parameters. Well, on phones and other wireless devices within a household, there are also options to do that as well. So that may be helpful if you can't come up with kind of designated times within the house for her to not be on her phone. Um, and you just kind of want to make sure, like, let's say she's kind of adhering to bedtimes and stuff and that she's not on her phone with that. You can kind of just cut off her service during specified times. Okay, so our next question is coming from Tyler, and he writes, I'm trying to keep my son engaged in school, but he doesn't see the point. I'm tired of fighting and about to give up. What can I say that will help? This is a really tricky question in the sense because a lot of schools have already made determinations for grades, and some have said, for instance, we're only going to just use the grade that your child had prior to the implementation of distance learning. And essentially what they're doing now might not really count for anything. And so I could see where, your son might feel like, well, then this is what's the point of this if I'm not necessarily going to get a grade. But the thing is that this situation in and of itself is not going to be permanent. And there's going to be a point in time where kids return to the classroom. And so the work that they're doing right now can be very beneficial just as far as practicing those skills and making it easier for that return to the classroom. So that could be something that you could talk with your son about. Just the fact that this is a temporary situation and utilizing and practicing these skills now are absolutely going to benefit him in the future, even if he doesn't necessarily see it that way. Another way that you can frame this is just more so just kind of the benefit to the family unit. So one thing that I tell kids and parents alike too is that a child's job is to be a student. And that's what you could say to your son, that that's just essentially his responsibility is to be a student. And that's why he needs to do these sort of things. It's the same way that your job as a parent or a caregiver is you are a provider, right? Your child doesn't have to beg you to go to work so that you can help, pay bills. So if their job is to be a student, you shouldn't have to beg them to be a student and to take care of those responsibilities. And you can also tell them too, I've already got enough things that I'm dealing with. This is something that's supposed to be your responsibility. And, you're putting additional kind of stress on me to have to kind of keep staying on top of you to get these sort of things done. So now it becomes less about kind of his feelings and more about your feelings, about the fact that if he does this, this helps take some pressure off of you. And that may be a way that can be helpful for you. Okay, these are some good questions. Okay, so our next question is from Tara, and she writes, I'm at a loss. My daughter is engaging with conspiracy theories about COVID online. She's arguing with us at dinner, telling her sisters things that don't make sense, and refuses to listen to reason. What do I do? This is quite the challenging position to be in because teens at their age, they're very impressionable. And one thing we know for sure is that there is a lot of misinformation online. And what makes that so dangerous is that misinformation impacts how we behave and what types of choices that we make. And so if somebody is running with a theory that the virus is not real, well, then that calls into question the purpose of, staying at home, being socially distant, um, wearing masks, things like that. And that's what can make this so dangerous, because we know that there are lives at stake. And practicing these measures are things that, can potentially help save lives, which is why, we've been instructed to do this. So one of the first things that I think would be really helpful is to have a private conversation um, with your daughter. And in this conversation, it's really important to hear her out and to hear what sort of theories she has. If you just go in there and you just automatically shut her down and tell her, that's wrong, there's no science that's backed by that, kind of like, what are you listening to? She's going to shut down. And she's not going to be in the position to then hear what you have to say, because you haven't heard what she has to say. And so you want to give her that opportunity to be able to have that conversation with you, where she can discuss what it is that she's learned, even if you don't agree with it. You just want to be able to give her that respect and hope that in turn she'll give you the respect to hear her out. Now, from this conversation, I would not go in it with the intent that after this discussion you're going to change her mind, because that might not be the case. But I think what's important when you have this kind of conversation is just to make sure that people feel understood and that your daughter feels understood, or more so heard, just heard from you. You don't necessarily have to kind of understand what she's saying, but that she feels heard and she's had an opportunity to voice her opinion. Now, one thing I would also recommend is that, you can't necessarily control what she believes, but what you can have some sense of control over is, if she's spreading this misinformation onto other people. And so I would recommend that you tell her to stop having conversations with her sister about this. It's one thing for her to believe this, but now we're bringing somebody else into it. And I don't know the age of her sister, but I imagine too that she might be very impressionable as well. And and we just kind of want to kind of stop the misinformation as quickly as possible. Next, I would say to you to just kind of show her and direct her to reputable sources of information. Things such as the CDC, or if you have any specific news outlets that you watch and that you trust, whether they're on TV or through kind of like online kind of media streams, point her in the direction of those. Sometimes when talking to kids, they may not want to hear that information that you're telling them, or maybe even believe it because it's just coming from you. It's like, oh, mom said it or dad said it. But now you're kind of showing them the kind of sources of where you're getting this information. And that may make it a little bit more reputable for them. Additionally, I think it would be highly important for your team to show you where she's getting her information from. Now, there are on kind of certain websites, certain forums, places where you can report or flag misinformation. And so that can be beneficial just for other people who potentially are getting information that they believe to be true that's not, and for kind of the people or the powers that be in charge of those types of sites to take them down. Additionally, this might not be a kind of long-term solution, but you can also set filters onto specific websites once you know where exactly she's getting this information from, just kind of blocking her access to them. But just kind of keep in mind that teens can be very savvy and figure out other avenues to locate information like this. And last but not least, what I would tell her is that kind of regardless of her beliefs, we're not going to change our behavior kind of in this house. And so things like wearing masks when you leave the house, or, gloves, staying home, kind of, just kind of following some of those CDC guidelines, um, maintaining 6 feet of distance between others. Make sure that she understands that those are things that you're going to continue to do, even if she doesn't think that this um, is coming from an actual virus or something like that. So we've also got a question. How do you help a teenager that thinks nobody is there for her? Oh. Well, first, I kind of want to assess, how factual of a statement is this? Do you guys have family that's around? Do we have any sort of point people that your teen can talk to? And sometimes that's not going to be parents. It could be aunts, uncles, any sort of mentors in their life. Um, and if you can't kind of think of people like that, potentially, or your child can't think of people like that, potentially maybe you might have some ideas for people that could kind of fill that role. If kind of family, friends, you either can't think of any, or you don't even think that they might be an appropriate outlet for your child as far as what sort of needs she might have, then I would absolutely recommend like a therapist of sorts. I mean, at the Child Mind Institute, we are up and running with as far as telehealth services and providing those to children's, teens, and just kind of overall families. And so that may be something that you feel like that, she might benefit from, just maybe at this point in time, or even to going forward. Sometimes, kids have these sort of feelings beforehand, but their life has been so busy and they're around so many people that it doesn't emerge as being all too problematic. But something like this hits, and there's tons of just kind of isolation and so many, unfortunate changes. People are dying, kind of, their school years completely disrupted. And so those sort of problems just kind of get worse. And so, getting some sort of professional help might really be potentially the best answer in just those situations. So I want to thank you all again for joining me. I hope it was helpful. And remember, we're here every day and we look through your questions daily. The Child Mind Institute is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. Please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more about the incredible variety of remote telehealth resources we have available during this time for children, teens, and young adults. Be safe, and thank you.